No one ever told you that it was wrong to say revengeful remarks about that child in school that you made because he did something bad toward you. No one told you that it was wrong for you to have those thoughts and those words. No one told you that it was wrong to accept all the gloom and defeat of life as your own. No one ever told you that these 1,001 things were wrong because they themselves didn't know they were wrong. What a different kind of a human being you would be today if you had met someone who had plunged into the maze of life and come out on the other side of the tunnel and could tell you at every step, Bill, Mary, that is the wrong thing to think, to do, to react. That's the wrong way to go through life. And if they told you that as often as it was possible, you would take on the right feeling that that person was right and begin to want to do it for yourself, from yourself. Because calling attention of wrongness to yourself automatically puts you into a brief right state, which in time would become your right state all the time. And then you would be able to tell yourself when you thought something wrong, something bad, some hostile thought against someone. You'd be able to tell yourself that it was wrong and know that you were right in telling yourself that it was wrong. Unfortunately, and you all agree with me, you have to agree with me, it never happened. No one ever told you that all these negative, revengeful feelings and thoughts that you had in you were wrong. They didn't know it themselves, therefore they could not correct you. No wonder everyone turns out the way they are. Good news, in spite of the complete spiritual, moral failure of society toward each individual, in spite of the fact that society doesn't want to do what is right but prefers what's wrong because they know no other, in spite of everything, anything that ever happened to you because you were not corrected, because you were not told that it was wrong, in spite of that, every single wrongness you ever did can be corrected. The light healing is always present to an individual who wants it. There is again, therefore, no reason why any man or woman should ever stay under the treacherous power of the past, of conditioning, of the hardness of your ignorance in accepting wrong as being right when you were younger or even yesterday. Everyone is occupying the valley of gloom, and anyone occupying it cannot correct anyone else. The only person, which would be a spirit of truth, that can correct another person in the valley of gloom is someone who was also there and through hard, vigorous, and enjoyable hard work climbed out of the valley, came to the mountain, and then came on back to the valley again, untouched by it. How can light be touched by darkness? You, in order to be a good corrective person to other people, have to do that yourself. You have to climb out and then come back. But where you are, surrounding you by, let's say, by approximately 6 yards, all around you is light, so that when you are in the valley of gloom that other people are in, you are not in the valley of gloom. You've brought your own bright light from the mountaintop down with you. This is why you can rejoice and be very glad that no circumstance can ever be wrong for you. Nothing, no comment anyone can make, no injury to your bank account, No injury to your precious darling feelings can ever be taken as something wrong. There is no wrongness in a person who is truly right. There never is, there never will be. No one ever told you that it was wrong to do what you did when you were born and then grew up. 4 times a week, we emphasize that so that the healing can start at once, continue, and there are really, in reality, no obstacles at all to you knowing what has happened to you, the dreadful, horrible impositions and misleadings that people gave to you right in your own home as a child. You know that now, don't you? You suspect it. There are no obstacles to anyone who wants to listen and to learn. You've heard somewhere, or read it in a book, about the still small voice that wants to get through to a person, wants to get through to you. I tell you, that still small voice exists. It is trying to speak to you now as I am speaking to you now. Because the Spirit of truth is in this building right now, and there are no obstacles at all to it coming through to healing you and telling you what is wrong after which you know what is right. There are no obstacles at all to that except your stubborn clinging to your old ways for fear there may not be anything else. There is. There is, therefore, get it down in your mind somewhere, a right voice, a true voice that is stronger than 10 billion wrongs in the world that ever began since the world began. They are totally powerful over the seeming arrogance and fierceness of wrongness. Rightness, maybe this will help you. Rightness has no opposition. Wrongness has 10 billion oppositions. Where there is a wrong, there will be an opposite wrong to that wrong. There will be 10 billion of them. That's the way it works on the level of opposites of a divided mind, of a divided human being. Rightness, the pureness, the light has no division. It is one thing. Nothing can stop it. How do we go about recovering our spiritual hearing of this small and very pure and very compassionate voice? There is a way, and I'll tell you a little story about it. There was a police case in which the police wanted to solve a certain crime that had been committed. And the only clue they had was a cassette tape. And this cassette tape was of a conference, a business conference, where there were a dozen men in a business room, all talking in an informal way, and the cassette was being played. The cassette player was on, and their voices, their conversations, their little shouts. You know how the average conversation in a conference goes back and forth. One person speaks, then another, and the whole thing became very jumbled for an hour or so. But the police had this cassette recording of the conference, and there was one man's voice in there who could be a witness in solving the crime. If they knew they could find out who this one man was, they would have a witness and they would know who had committed the crime, because his voice was accurate, the accurate one. So they listened to it and couldn't get anything out of it at all. Jumbled, confusing, dozen voices, sometimes several of them speaking at once. So they did something. Now, here's the application. They did something we have to do. They turned the cassette tape with its confusion over to a scientific laboratory. And they had all the sophisticated electronic equipment where they could separate the voices, where they could play it over and over and over a dozen times, register the pitch of each voice, get recognizing each man as he spoke. Finally, after long hard work, scientific work, they were able to isolate this one man's voice, and they knew who he was. They could recognize it finally. And they found him, and he came forward and told them what he knew about the crime, which solved it. What a crime that we continue to live as we do. Did you ever think about it that way? Did you ever consider the fact that you're living in a criminal society, and it does want to impose its wrongness onto you, and it's become so jumbled? Will you admit you're confused? Raise your hand. Everyone who's confused. Everyone raised their hand, yes. We can, however, the committal cassette tape, with its hundreds of contradictory and chaotic and shouting voices, we can submit it to the scientific laboratory called the Spirit of Truth. It will do for you what you can't do for yourself. It will gradually, as you listen and try to find, try to hear the one true voice as the policeman did. You're trying to hear the one true voice that's trying to speak to you, trying to break out of 50 years, 60 years, depending on how old you are. You're trying to isolate it, and I tell you, it is there. You, through feeling a wrong voice, not just hearing it, you have to feel it. Do you know that you can feel rightness as well as say it, as well as think it? This is called higher emotions. When you feel it, there'll be this stronger sensing. You see, it's not so much at the start trying to find what is wrong, but find out what is right, but find out what is wrong. If our old nature tries to find out what is right, it immediately lies to us in order to preserve its tyranny over us, and then we call the wrong right, and we never find the true right. The process consists of listening carefully and with wanting to know the difference between darkness and light. And you will hear, just like on a piano, a false note, you will hear something wrong being said, and your receptivity to truth will sound a right note, and that will recognize the wrong note. You play a right note and put it alongside a wrong note, you'll know what is right on a piano, won't you? The same thing happens inwardly.
Hi, this is Desi Arnaz Jr. Vernon Howard classes are essential for higher development.
Vernon Howard. Over the next several days, ask yourself the following question. Is it possible that I am fighting anxiously to keep my own nervous nature in place? Ask yourself that. Ask, could it be that I have a lifelong love affair with my harmful neurosis? Could it be that I am repetitiously keeping in place everything that I don't want in my life because I do sense how terrible it is and doing things against me? In summary already, go through the next several days asking yourself if it just might be possible that you are holding your own pain in place and not realizing it. It is enough to pose the question to yourself and don't try to answer it. If you try to answer it, you will never know the real answer. Because all your life you've been asking yourself questions. How come people don't like me? How come I'm lonely? How come things never turn out right? And then you answer them and you keep the question going again. You never run out of the question. Have you noticed that? If you had found the true answers to life, you would have no questions at all. The questions continue because you have an unconscious need to cling to your petty, limited, unhappy little world. I ask you, and I ask you again for your sake, to go through the next several days repeatedly asking yourself whether or not it might be a fact that you are keeping your fear, your anxiety, your stress, your confusion in place. If you simply ask the question and then stop, you will have made the higher real answer possible for it to come to you. So you must be very alert to see that you remain with the question and don't go beyond it, because, oh, I tell you, your habits of a lifetime are both very fierce and persistent, and they insist upon supplying the answers, and you have got to catch them in the act and refuse them. Your answers never have and never will satisfy you. If you'll stay with a question, leave it blank after that, the real answer, the satisfying one, which will dissolve the question, will come to you, and you will know what you are all about at last. Don't answer the question. That's the summary. Ask it, but don't answer it. Now, we're going to go deeper into that. Why is it that we insist upon staying with what we are? You've heard many times that you can change who you are and what you are, that you can lift your level, that you can be different. You've heard that, but nothing happens to you. Nothing happens of a positive nature, and you know that. Of all the talks you've heard, of all the truth that you've absorbed up to a point about the higher life has not become a reality to you, and no one knows it better than you. Why? What's wrong? There is a higher answer to that, but you're not getting it yet because you're still insisting on yours. And I want to tell you the mistake you have made without realizing that it was a mistake. Because it is one of these traps, one of these negative forces that you have been unable to detect. You're not a good enough spiritual detective yet. You follow too many false clues. Listen to this. What is keeping you in your present state of not having the liberating answers is your negative attention. Negative attention. And I'm going to have to illustrate that because, oh, these are so deep. If we don't find ways to make them easier, we just won't get them. You are captured by your negative attention. You know what attention is. You look to a certain site physically and you see the automobile. Attention is on the automobile. You change it to something else and you see the ad on the billboard or whatever. Attention is where you're giving, your mind is on a particular thing at a particular moment. A man was walking along a narrow path all the time, the path, same path that you were on. And this man was walking along it all day long, all night long, the path of life. And on his right was an upward slope, and on his left was a downward slope. On his right, on the upward slope, where the terrain grew higher and higher, it was a pretty place. Everything pretty and enjoyable and healthy was on the upward slope. There was farmers working in their lush fields. There were children playing, and there were picnickers, and it was pretty and green. A nice view, a nice place to be. A higher ground. On his left, as he walked, on his left was a downward slope. And down there were people who were quarreling, and the geography was dry and miserable. And the people were sad, and you could see just by the way they moved that they had no real life to them. Now, here's our traveler, which is you. You are the traveler along this path. Upward slope on the right, downward slope on the left. Now, as he walked along this path through life, his attention was downward to the negative. There was something in him that was more attracted to the downhill sights than the uphill ones. So as he walked, he kept his negative attention, captured negative attention, downward to the quarreling people, to the unhappy, unpleasant sights, to things that were dreary, to things that were lifeless. So, quite naturally, now you ought to be able to understand what I'm getting at. If not, give a little extra effort to it. As his captured attention, his attention was captured to the downward slope, he began to absorb impressions from it. And would you like to guess what kind of impressions he got? From people who were sad, who were antagonistic, people who had a lot of things to fuss about. He saw what he saw on the downward slope, and he became what he saw. Why? Why? Because his attention was there. That's why. You do become what you attend to. Can't you see this on an elementary level, how you are influenced by advertising? You're influenced by another person's attitude toward you, by the way they look at you. You become what you see. So here's our traveler looking down, pretty miserable trip, pretty sad, pretty disappointing. His attention was captured by the lowlands, by the negative sights and negative people. Why? I will tell you why he preferred to look down there, because that's the way he was. You were always in company and seek more company of what you presently are. That's where he felt, quote mark, comfortable with his own nature, with himself. Once in a while, as he walked along, his attention would be briefly caught by the upward slope where it was pretty and nice and cheery and happy and healthy and wholesome. His attention would be caught by that, but he didn't want to linger there because it was different from his dominating mood, his dominating nature. He didn't, isn't this a tragic story of human life? He didn't feel comfortable with what was truly comfortable. He only felt comfortable with what was uncomfortable. That is the agitation. He became what he saw. He became surly. He became antagonistic. He became what he saw. So here he is walking along. I've described your life. Now, the reason what happened to him, the way it did happen, was because his attention was captured, and he didn't understand what that meant, and he didn't make any effort to break it. Well, now you know why everyone you know stays as glum, as gloomy, as cruel as they are. Don't you know that the people down there are cruel? Don't you know if you're... Oh, let's see how much you can take. If you are sad, you are cruel. Well, you mean to tell me that your sad mood, your sad expression is giving happiness to other people? You mean to say that your sadness is sunshine? Don't be ridiculous. So, his attention was attracted every once in a while, but he didn't like it there. He didn't like what he saw because he didn't know. He didn't know, and he couldn't know at this stage where he really belonged, was with his attention up there, so that he could become like what he had up, that could become what was above his present position. You are going to have to go against the habits of your entire life, as much as you don't want to do it. For your sake, do it. The slightest bit of effort to break your attention away from downward to the other side, the very first attempt will be felt by you. It'll be felt as something different. And then you'll try it again, and you feel a little more different, a little more. Pretty soon, you will feel yourself feeling better, because you're not taking in the impressions from that horrible state, that horrible dark valley and slope down there. See, and of course, as it falls away, then your attention goes to the other side. You feel different. You feel sunny because you've taken the impressions from there. You're taking your guidance from there. The truth comes down, and of course you feel better. Summary again to this point. Starting now, you remember how I started the talk? You to see how negative you are and you love it. Starting right now, and never, never stop. Make an effort to break away. Write down just those two words. That'll help you. Break away. And it makes no difference how long you have suffered. Makes no difference how much you fight the sunny slope and how deeply and terribly you're in love with the dark place down there. It makes no difference at all how long your attention has been to the left and downward, because anytime you want, how's this for true encouragement? Anytime you really want, you can turn your attention away from there and turn it upward and feel the difference. Do it right now.
Hi, this is Desi Arnaz Jr. Vernon Howard classes are essential for higher development.
Is Vernon Howard. I will read a submitted question aloud. I may not show it outwardly, but I am easily shaken by bad behavior of another person toward me. Where do I find relief? You've seen a mystery movie where a pretty young lady is being stalked down the dark street by a hooded figure. You've seen the scene many times. It's dark and foggy, and all the streets are deserted, and here's this young lady running away rapidly from a hooded figure in back of her. She doesn't understand it. She doesn't know, she doesn't know how she got into that position, how she happens to be in that place in the first place of being slowly but relentlessly stalked by a figure she doesn't understand. And the fact that it's hooded is her greatest terror of the moment. Because when you can identify something, you can think intelligently toward it. You can understand whether it's a friend or foe and then act toward it. But when it's hooded, when it doesn't reveal itself, you don't know how to think toward it. So our young heroine is trying to escape this menace, whatever it is, as it pursues her, and she doesn't know what is coming after her. And so she runs away and usually does the wrong things, doesn't she? She turns into the wrong alley, and finally the figure catches up to her. This is parallel to something that is going on inside of every human being. To state it in a different way, you do not know how to think toward human badness. She knew something menacing was coming after her, but she didn't know how to think toward it. Now, look at you in your relationships to fearsome, what you call fearsome objects, people, situations. You don't know how to think toward them, correct? Is that right? You will just take that as a fact. You don't know how to think toward whatever hooded figure is after you. You don't know what to do about it except to run, which makes it impossible for you to ever identify it, which makes it impossible for you to stop running. Now, in your life, not every day does some scary person come up and stand in front of you and make you afraid. That doesn't happen all the time. It does sometimes. Maybe someone yells at you, or some situation comes up where another human being puts you under fear. I'm not talking so much about that because it doesn't happen so frequently. I am talking to you about a hooded figure who is after you for some unknown purpose, and it is happening all the time. There is no escape from it. I'm talking about the force of fear itself that you can't understand, that you can't escape, that you can't explain, but there it is, and the only thing you know what to do with it is to run away from it. Now, I want to tell you, make it quite clear to you, that this vague fog, this unknown fear that is after you all the time, has a purpose which you don't see. The purpose of fear is to make you afraid. Now, there are malicious human beings who are afraid themselves, who have added something else to their own terror, their own insecurity, and the force of fear operates through human selves, human bodies, male and female. The force of fear operates through them, and because certain human beings are afraid of being afraid, their motive is to pass this fear in them onto you so that you will become afraid, and then they will get what they call relief from their fear by making you afraid, and so they can feel false relief from their fear by saying, see, I'm not afraid. I have power to tyrannize you. I have the strength to hurt you. Any wrong, evil result in this world comes about through what I've just described to you. Crime, for example, is committed by men and women who have fear in them, fear of life. They don't understand it. And so crimes are committed to try to get a different kind of a feeling than one of fear, but it never works. So, a summary at this point, the object of fear is to keep you under fear so that other human beings who are passing it on to you can try to feel relief from their own anxiety and insecurity, which never happens. So you now must make a very bold move. Do it now. This bold move is for you to see that the purpose of all fear, no matter where, when, how, the purpose of all fear is to intimidate you, to make you think that you are necessarily under its all power. But it isn't all power. It appears to be, because you haven't achieved a certain insight yet. That means you have to get rid of your fear, and that's the solution to the whole business. Now, here's where you're going to have to be spiritually unique. You're going to have to be a truly noble human being. The nobility of reality itself, by the way, not of your own self. You are going to have to break off the pattern that has kept your insecurity in place. And you can do it right now. And I will explain how you can proceed at this very minute. Relief is no relief. Now, what does that mean? When you choose relief from your tension, stress, confusion, worry, when you choose to relieve it, it always comes back. That girl rushing down the street, trying to get away from the menace, trying to get away from it, she could get a little bit of relief maybe by huddling up against a wall and maybe seeing the figure walk by her. She get a little bit of relief from it, but then she has to go out into the street again, doesn't she? And when she goes out in the street, that's where the menace is, the hooded figure is, and he sights her again and chases her again. And she goes out and maybe she stops somewhere else, hides behind a tree or something. Sooner or later, because she's out in the dark street, which is the representative of being lost, sooner or later she has to come back out into the street, and that's where the hooded figure always is. So her attempts to escape fear by relief never work. What are you doing to relieve your fear of life? What are you doing to escape the fact that you have no idea of who you are? Well, a lot of people go into alcoholism. Others become workaholics. Others invent a wide variety of escapes. For example, giving advice to other people. You see, when you give advice to other people, and if it's compulsive, that of course means you don't know what you're talking about, but that is your escape for a minute, and you can say, well, I gave him or her advice, so surely I must know what I'm talking about. You can't believe it, can you? The point up to now is that relief never works. Why don't you be very audacious right now and never again relieve your anxiety? No matter who is pursuing you down those dark, foggy streets, no matter what is after you, refuse to try to escape from it to find relief. Can you imagine a movie, since we're using that as the story part, can you imagine a movie? Look at the girl's scared face, you know. She's terrified and pale. Here she's running away down the street, and the figure, it's more menacing when he goes slow than fast, isn't it? Stalking instead of running after her. Can you imagine him coming down steadily like a mechanical machine, relentlessly toward her, and all of a sudden she stops, and she turns around, and she starts walking toward the hooded figure, walks right up to it, and takes his mask off. And she sees who he is, and do you know, did I tell you what happens when you do that? I'll tell you what happens if you will do that. When you open it, not only will there be nothing behind the mask, there'll be nothing in the whole hooded figure, and the hood and the whole cloak will fall to the ground. There was nothing inside. Do you know who put that menace inside her, inside of the figure? She did. Imagination, false concepts about yourself. And when you have a false concept, you are afraid because you are apart from reality. When you're not with what is real, you feel unreal, and that is fear. And then you create all these fears because it has become your solidified life. Most people never, ever escape a certain horror, which is this: the horror of alternating between the scared girl, and her fear is false, of course, but she doesn't know that because she wants to be scared. They alternate between the hooded figure doing the scaring and the girl who is scared.
Hi, this is Desi Arnaz Jr. Vernon Howard classes are essential for higher development.
Don't miss out. Come here, Vernon Howard in person. There's 4 classes every week.
Of trying to learn to fly, his father, Papa Eagle, finally said something to him that hit him just right. All the other things didn't work. But his wise, big, broad Father Eagle finally said something that made all the difference in the world. And after that, he learned to fly very smoothly and powerfully, and grew up into a powerful eagle himself. His father said this, and here's your very, very high soaring lesson. His father said, no matter how many times you fail, no matter how discouraged and angry and emotional you get over your inability to learn to fly, no matter what you do, the miracle of flight itself remains intact and forever. The principle of flight remains. You, Junior Eagle, you don't affect that with your failures, with your angers. You see, the principle of flight, the principles of spiritual flight are always there. They always were. They are now. They always will be. But now you have to do something to realize that, to the point where the principle, the miracle of flight becomes yours operationally. That is, so you can actually fly and soar above this world. What you have to do, Junior, to enter into the principles of flight, which are unfailing, always successful, which are eternal, what you have to do is stop enjoying yourself being so infantile, being so complaining. And you have to give up your fear of failure, Junior. You can't behave at all the way you have been behaving the last few days. Your attitude is all wrong. And the reason your attitude is all wrong is because it's self-centered. You simply, now let me ask you if this hits some of you somewhere. Junior, Papa Eagle said to his son, all you want to do is keep your center of attention around yourself, and you'll do anything to get the attention of your mother and I. And to keep your attention on yourself. In other words, Junior, you're a very, very small eagle. You're undeveloped. You are indeed infantile. And you don't understand that you have to grow up. How about human beings? Same thing applied to them, of course. Do you understand why you are not rising above the ground of this horrible, sick world you live in, where fear dominates everyone? The reason you're not doing it is because you still prefer your failure, and that is it. God is successful. Truth, offering to men and women on earth the principle of flight, offers men and women something they are capable of receiving, understanding, and flying through life with. You will never succeed in blocking out completely the still small voice inside of you that tells you that flight is possible. You sense that there is something different from your flopping failures. You still want to lose yourself in agony, in emotionalism, in preference to flying above this world. You've made a pretty bad choice. Remember this, it will help you. Truth, the principle and miracle of flight, is apart from what you now are. It is different from you. It is not you. So you must not try to bring it down to your level. You prefer your fear, and your fear is what prevents you from flying. You've played a very cunning trick on yourself in order to excuse yourself. You say, I can't fly, because you prefer the passionate, neurotic outburst of saying, I can't fly. You want to feel your words. You want to feel as if you were saying them, and you're not saying them at all. Sickness says, I can't fly. Sickness never can fly. No wonder you don't fly. You're trying to fly with sickness. You, as you are now, and the everlasting principle of flight are two different things. You can't cry your way into the kingdom of flight. You can't fake your way. What you can do is very successfully, if you're that foolish, what you can do is successfully keep yourself grounded on the level of this world's sphere and be part of that. That is not an intelligent choice. The reason it's not an intelligent choice is because there is an intelligence that is not a part of what you have settled for. If you will right now, and please do it right now, will you please just abandon your discouragement? All you have to do right now, and you can do it right now, I assure you, guarantee you, you can drop your fear right now. And when you drop it, you will see that all the other negative elements, the hooded figures chasing you, you will find that they will disappear too, because your fear was the whole fog itself, and when the whole fog clears, there are no menaces there in the sunshine. Just do it to see what happens different. You don't have to make anything happen. Truth has already happened. It's solid. The principle is there. You can't hurt it, and you can't help it. All you have to do is be willing to not want your flopping, complaining failures anymore. It's what you don't want that finally saves you. When you don't want you anymore, the replacement, which you won't understand right now, but which you can live if you do it, the replacement is the principle of everlasting life itself. And in that, there are no fears as you have now. There is new life in new life. Want to understand all you've heard, and that desire to understand will work for you, and you will indeed understand, and you will fly above the world of fear.
Hi, this is Amy. Time to open the mailbox again. One of Vernon's books was of special help to a woman in Hawaii. She writes, "Dear Vernon, the mystic path to cosmic power has been a great inspiration to me for years. I don't know how often I've loaned it or given it outright to friends in need." A gentleman in the state of Kentucky writes, "You'll never know how much I appreciate your news about the new tapes. I must have them. There's an order enclosed along with another small contribution. I almost never miss a day of reading or listening to the tapes. I find the tapes deeper and more informative because of Mr. Howard's forceful but gentle way of speaking. I have searched for truth in every possible corner for more than 40 years. Everything I've found previously pales by comparison with Mr. Howard's teachings. He gets down to the nitty-gritty without a bunch of mumbo-jumbo. He does not try to impress you with a sense of his own greatness, like most of the other teachers. But I think he is the best teacher of truth I have ever found. May he live for centuries and continue his good work. I love his teachings more than I can ever say. The changes in my life have been quietly overwhelming. There's no turning back for me. I have no choice but to go forward, and that's the way I want it." Spiritual work is like finding new gold every day, as explained by this lady in New York. "Dear Mr. Howard, I want to show my appreciation for all that I have learned from your books and tapes. I reread your books frequently, and each time I can see something more, something that I wasn't ready for at the last reading. I thoroughly enjoy the tapes as well, and my hope is that someday I may be present at a meeting. In the meantime, thank you for all the treasures you have given me." How nice to know that a higher path exists, and exists for you. So for now, yours truly, Amy.
Back home, here is Vernon Howard.
we will cover the steps by which two different persons can start toward inner development. These stages can be taken by anyone who wants to go to the very end of the true purpose of life, which is to have a new nature. Now, here we have two men. They're both in the same stage of life. That stage consists of them not knowing their life, not understanding it, but imagining that they do. They don't know how to think correctly toward themselves, toward daily events. They are, in brief, both lost human beings who have covered it up with their imaginary life, their fantasies, and their imaginary aims of where they're going. And they always think they're going to a good place, never knowing that they're only going to go in a circular movement within themselves and always come back to their own unhappiness. So we have two men in the same state. Next step. Both men receive a severe shock in life. One, his whole family structure breaks down and he parts from his family. The other, any other kind of a shock. It makes no difference. A shock is a shock. Something that you can't take. His finances falls apart. The other man, he loses his money. Or the shock could be anything else regarding the health, regarding suddenly being in strange circumstances, anything at all. So far, both men are in the same place, not understanding themselves or life, and now they receive a jolt of some kind, a crisis. Something comes along that just throws them down on the ground and they don't know what to do. They just cry out inwardly. Third step. The third step is that for a while, both of these men are confronted with something they had not been confronted by before, which is the fact that they really were fakers and didn't understand their life, because the crisis proved it. As long as things are going well in the outer life, people can go along and pretend that they're confident, that they're in charge. And then a crisis comes along and disproves it, correct? You've gone through this, haven't you? So now we have the third step that they're both in. And they're embarrassed to see their weakness. They're ashamed of themselves. They're confused. They're hurt. They don't know which way to turn. They are blocked inside themselves. All right, now we have our two men in the third stage, where neither of them have any idea of what to do about their sudden downfall. Now, this is the critical stage, and this is the one that you have to pay very close attention to when it happens to you. And by degrees, it happens to you every day. Don't you have little small jolts every day? Little ones, maybe once a month or once every 6 months you have a severe one? All right. All jolts, all surprises, all downfalls, all disgraces can be used rightly. All right. Our first man does not use it rightly at all. He begins to fight to preserve his own ignorance. And he has a supply of ammunition for doing that. He goes into hatred of someone else, blaming someone else. He goes into pretense that he's right and the other person is wrong, always finding something outside of himself to blame for his condition. He will never admit that he has always been a wrong human being. So he becomes hardened in that. And this hardness, I want to describe with one particular word, and keep this word in mind as we proceed. His hardness comes into a big block of ice called conceit. We're generalizing now and say that now we have a conceited man with all the horrible elements that go with conceit. Arrogance, striking out at someone. This man's philosophy is, if you disturb me, I'll hit you. Does that apply to you, by the way? When someone disturbs you, don't you want to strike out in some way? Maybe not with a rock, but with your thoughts. Don't you hurl thoughts at people? That's his philosophy. He's hardened in that. He has made unknown to himself the blunder of his life. There it was, right in front of him, the opportunity to not be who he was. And he rejects it in favor of self-conceit. The other man, the very rare man, he wants to do something else with these repeated shocks that he has over the years. You know what he chooses? It's so simple to say, and you can do it. He chooses to understand why he fell down. And he begins to take responsibility for his own downfall, for his own tears, for his own anger, for his own misery. He takes responsibility for it. That man has parted completely from the other man, and incidentally, on the social level, except where they have to be with each other in business or whatever, they won't want anything to do with each other. Darkness wants nothing to do with light. Light wants nothing to do with darkness, and it happens all by itself. As you grow in the light, you automatically want nothing to do with other people on your former low level. And if you don't feel that, if you're not doing that, that means you're not growing. That means you're saying you're understanding when you really don't. Where you have agreed happily and enthusiastically to drop your conceit in favor of being a complete whole person, in that stage there is no I, no conceit at all. In its place is the one world, an undivided world, which I briefly illustrated. There's no division even between the physical world and the spiritual world. They're all one world, different elements in you operating. But in this stage, what you know and the knower are the same thing. They are the same entity. And you can say person if you want, if you use the word person consciously, knowingly. There is no division. That means there is not you saying in conceit, I know the riches of the king. I did something to get them, and I want credit, and I want to go around and tell other people all about it with a secret motive of you getting credit for knowing the king. If you say you know God, you don't know God. If you have an idea, a thought that you are one with the kingdom, you are not. You are divided from the kingdom. You have the conceit of wanting to say, I am a good religious person, or I understand truth. See, the absence of idea, of thought, of belief, of conviction, the absence of that is the kingdom without conceit. Then, knower and the known are one single, indivisible, eternal thing. Are you following this? This means you have to be so careful, so alert for the thought process to leap in like a thief in the night, to take away from you that brief experience you had while you were collecting, with the king's permission and encouragement, while you were collecting the good things. You have to watch, oh, so sharp every second for thought to enter into your system and say, I am going to get some glory out of the king's glory. You cannot have glory. You cannot have vanity. You can't have anything that seems to reflect favorably upon you, because there is in reality no you there at all. There are only ideas about you. I wonder how many of you listening to this talk are willing to indeed go all the way with it. Even listen to this talk over and over again so that you can pick up bits of light as you go along, and let that light show you the whole story of what it means to sacrifice finally, once and for all that unseen trickery and conceit which has kept you out of the kingdom. Aren't you willing to give up the traitor? You know, the traitor, the enemy spy comes into a country with the uniform of the country he's spying on. Outwardly, he has the uniform of the country that he's in, but underneath he has his own enemy uniform on. See, this is why you feel uncomfortable. You are your own traitor to yourself, and outwardly you pretend that you're not. But underneath is the betrayer. Underneath is the conceit. Underneath are all the little thoughts by which you hope. Now listen to this. Little things that you want to do by which you hope that you're going to feel better. You've seen galley slaves in movies. They're all machines, aren't they? They're sitting in the lower part of the big boat, all of them in unison, rowing on the boat, hard physical labor. And the brutal guard is up there on the top of them there with the whip, and he's pounding something so that they have to keep in step, so to speak, keep in rowing step with keeping the boat going forward. Miserable chain down.